I was standing at the altar in a silk gown the color of champagne when the chapel doors slammed open and my ex-husband stumbled in, disheveled and desperate, shouting my name like I still owed him something. The entire congregation turned. My fiancé's hand tightened around mine. And in that moment, I realized the universe had just handed me the most poetic form of closure imaginable. Because tucked in my maid of honor's clutch was a manila envelope containing documents that would change everything.
3 years ago, I didn't think I'd survive the month. Derek had walked out on a Tuesday morning in March, leaving behind 2 bewildered kids, a stack of overdue bills, and a handwritten note on the kitchen counter that said he needed to find himself. No forwarding address, no child support, just silence and the hollow echo of his absence in every corner of our rented duplex. Maya was 7 then, and Ethan was 4. They asked for him every night for weeks. I'd tuck them in with stories about brave astronauts and clever foxes, anything to distract them from the question I couldn't answer: why Daddy left. I worked 2 jobs, morning shift at a dental office, evenings waitressing at a diner off the highway. My sister Jenna moved in to help with childcare, sleeping on our lumpy couch and making mac and cheese stretch across 4 days. The divorce had been ugly in its simplicity. Derek never showed up to court. His lawyer claimed he had no assets, no income, nothing to give. The judge awarded me full custody and a symbolic child support order that went unpaid month after month. I didn't have money for a forensic accountant or a private investigator. I just had survival mode and a growing list of things my kids couldn't have: new shoes, birthday parties at the trampoline park, a bedroom that wasn't shared. But I'm stubborn. My mother used to say I inherited my grandmother's spine, the kind that doesn't bend even when the wind howls. I took night classes in medical billing and coding, finished my certificate in 18 months, and landed a position at a hospital with decent pay and benefits. Slowly, painfully, we clawed our way up. I bought a used sedan that didn't break down every other week. We moved into a small house with a backyard where Ethan could dig for worms and Maya could hang a tire swing. I met Daniel at a hospital fundraiser. He was a physical therapist, warm-eyed and patient, the kind of man who listened when you spoke and remembered details you mentioned in passing. He didn't flinch when I told him about Derek, about the kids, about the nights I still woke up calculating bills in my head. He just nodded and said, "You're the strongest person I've ever met." We dated for a year before he proposed on a hiking trail overlooking the valley, the autumn leaves turning gold around us. Planning the wedding was joyful in a way I'd forgotten life could be. Maya picked out her flower girl dress, a pale pink tulle number that made her spin in circles. Ethan practiced walking down the aisle with the rings tied to a small pillow, taking his job with the solemnity of a tiny general. Daniel's family embraced my kids like they'd always been part of the clan. His mother knitted them matching scarves. His brother taught Ethan how to throw a football. The venue was a historic chapel on the edge of town, all exposed brick and stained glass that caught the afternoon light. We kept it intimate: 60 guests, close friends and family, people who had carried us through the hard years. Jenna was my maid of honor, standing beside me in a dress the color of deep plum. The florist had outdone herself with wildflowers and eucalyptus, everything smelling of earth and new beginnings. I felt calm that morning. No jitters, no cold feet. I'd done the hard work of healing, of rebuilding myself piece by piece. This wasn't desperation or rebound. It was a deliberate choice to let love in again. Daniel and I had talked through everything: blended family logistics, financial transparency, how to handle discipline and holidays, and the inevitable friction of merging lives. We were ready. The ceremony started at 2. I walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing something soft and timeless, my father's arm steady beneath mine. Daniel stood at the altar in a navy suit, his smile wide and unguarded. Maya and Ethan sat in the front row, holding hands and grinning. The officiant began with a reading about love being patient and kind, and I felt my chest expand with something close to peace. We were halfway through our vows when the doors exploded open.
Derek looked like he'd been living in his car. His shirt was wrinkled, his jeans stained, and his hair stuck up in greasy tufts. He was thinner than I remembered, his face drawn and pale, but his eyes burned with that familiar mix of entitlement and desperation I'd seen 1,000 times before. He staggered down the aisle, breathing hard, pointing at me like I was the one who owed him an explanation. "Emily! Emily, wait!" His voice cracked. Guests gasped and murmured. Daniel stepped forward instinctively,
but I put a hand on his chest, steady and firm. I'd faced worse than Derek. I'd survived him once already. "You can't do this," Derek said, stopping a few feet from the altar. His hand shook. "You can't just... You have to help me. I'm broke. I've got nothing. You owe me, Em. After everything..." I felt a laugh bubble up, sharp and incredulous. "I owe you?" Jenna moved closer, her clutch held tight against her ribs. She knew. She'd been with me the day the private investigator delivered his report, the day everything clicked into place like a puzzle I'd been too exhausted to solve. She caught my eye and nodded once, calm and sure. Derek kept talking, rambling about bad investments and frozen accounts, about needing just enough to get back on his feet. He didn't even glance at Maya and Ethan, didn't acknowledge their existence. They sat frozen, wide-eyed and confused, and I felt a familiar surge of protective fury. "You walked out on us 3 years ago," I said, my voice carrying across the chapel. "You left me with 2 kids, no money, and no explanation. You didn't pay a single month of child support. You didn't show up to birthdays or school events or anything that mattered. And now you barge into my wedding because you need help?" He flinched, but the desperation didn't leave his face. "I know I screwed up, but I'm desperate. Just a loan, anything." Daniel's jaw tightened. My father half rose for his seat, but I shook my head. This was mine to handle. I turned to Jenna and held out my hand. She passed me the envelope without a word, her expression fierce and proud. I peeled it open slowly, letting the moment stretch. Inside were 3 sets of documents, each one more damning than the last. The private investigator had been thorough, months of digging through shell companies and offshore accounts, tracking the money Derek thought he'd hidden so well. "You want help?" I said, holding up the first page. "Let's talk about the $200,000 you transferred to a Cayman Islands account 2 weeks before you left, or the investment property in your cousin's name that you bought with our joint savings, or the consulting income you funneled through an LLC to avoid reporting it in the divorce." Derek's face went white. He stumbled back a step, shaking his head. You can't prove any of that." I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "I can. I did. It's all here. Every transaction, every hidden account, every lie you told the court. You claimed you had no assets. Turns out you had $42 million in liquidated holdings, rental income, and business interests. And according to our divorce decree, I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage, plus back child support, plus penalties for fraud." The chapel erupted. Guests gasped and whispered. Someone in the back let out a low whistle. Daniel stared at me, stunned, and then a slow grin spread across his face. Jenna was outright beaming. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. "You're blaming me for..." "I'm not blaming you," I interrupted. "I'm holding you accountable. My attorney filed the amended claim last week. The judge signed off this morning. You owe me $21 million in marital assets, plus $600,000 in back child support and interest, plus legal fees. The liens are already in place. Your properties, your accounts, everything. It's all frozen pending settlement." His knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of a pew to steady himself, his face flushing red and then draining to gray. "You're lying. You're making this up to..." I walked down the altar steps, my heels clicking against the wooden floor. I stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the panic flaring in his eyes. "I spent 3 years barely surviving while you lived off money you stole from our family. I worked 2 jobs. I skipped meals so my kids could eat, and you didn't lose a single night of sleep." Tears welled in his eyes, but they didn't move me. I'd cried enough for both of us. "Sign the settlement agreement," I said, pulling the final document from the envelope. "Accept the terms, set up a payment plan, and maybe you'll avoid criminal fraud charges. Or keep lying, keep hiding, and spend the next decade in court. Your choice." He stared at the paper like it might bite him. His hands trembled as he reached for it, scanning the lines, the numbers, the cold legal language that dismantled his carefully constructed lies. Behind me, Ethan whispered, "Is Daddy in trouble?" Maya shushed him gently, but I heard the uncertainty in her voice. Derek looked up at me, his face crumbling. "I can't pay this. It'll take years. I'll lose everything." "You already did," I said softly. "You lost it the day you walked out." Security arrived then, 2 broad-shouldered men Daniel's brother had hired just in case things went sideways. They moved with quiet efficiency, flanking Derek and taking his elbows. He didn't resist. He just stood there, clutching the unsigned settlement, looking small and defeated. "Get him out," I said. My voice didn't waver. They escorted him down the aisle and out through the heavy wooden doors. The chapel fell silent except for the rustling of fabric and the faint hum of whispered conversations. I turned back to the altar, where Daniel stood waiting, his expression full of something I could only describe as fierce admiration. But the moment wasn't over yet.
The officiant cleared his throat, visibly shaken but attempting to regain composure. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "that was unexpected. Should we continue?" I looked at Daniel. His eyes were soft, understanding, giving me the space to decide. I glanced at Maya and Ethan, still sitting in the front row, their faces a mix of confusion and cautious hope. Jenna stood beside me, squeezing my hand once, solid and sure. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. "We continue." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then building into something jubilant. My father laughed, a deep belly laugh that made others join in. Daniel's mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The tension shattered like glass, replaced by a wave of collective relief and joy. I walked back up the steps, smoothing my dress, and took Daniel's hands. He leaned in close, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're incredible. You know that, right?" I smiled, feeling the knot in my chest finally loosen. I had a good teacher. The officiant, recovering his rhythm, picked up where we'd left off. "Marriage is many things," he said, his voice warming. "It's partnership and patience. It's choosing each other every day, even when the days are hard. Emily and Daniel have both known hardship. They've both walked through fire, and they've chosen to walk forward together." Daniel's vows came first. He spoke about meeting me and seeing not just who I was, but who I was becoming. He talked about Maya and Ethan, about how loving them wasn't a burden but a gift. He promised to be present, to listen, to carry his share of the weight. His words were simple and true, and I felt my throat tightened with emotion. When it was my turn, I glanced at my kids. Maya gave me a small thumbs up. Ethan waved. I took a breath and spoke from the heart. "I didn't think I'd get here," I said. 3 years ago, I was drowning. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again, let alone loved. But you showed me that safety isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. It's about being honest when things are hard and celebrating when they're good. You love my kids like they're yours. You see me, all of me, and you stay. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. I promised to be his partner, his teammate, his safe place to land. I promised to build a life where laughter outnumbered tears and where our home was a refuge, not a battlefield. I promised to choose him every single day. We exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with our wedding date. The officiant pronounced us married, and Daniel kissed me, soft and sure, while the chapel erupted in cheers. Maya and Ethan ran up to us, wrapping their arms around our legs, and we stood there, the four of us, holding each other in the glow of stained glass light. The reception was held in a garden behind the chapel, strung with fairy lights and filled with long tables covered in white linen. The caterer had set up a taco bar, and there was a dessert table laden with cupcakes and cookies. A DJ played something upbeat, and people danced on a wooden platform laid over the grass. I spent the first hour greeting guests, accepting hugs and congratulations. My father pulled me aside at one point, his eyes misty. "I'm so damn proud of you," he said. "Not just for today, for everything, for surviving, for fighting back." Jenna clinked her glass during the toasts, standing with a microphone and a wicked grin. "I've known Emily since we were kids," she said, "and I've watched her face things that would break most people. She didn't just survive, she rebuilt. She became stronger, kinder, fiercer. And today she proved that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well and getting justice, both at the same time." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Hell yes." Daniel's brother raised his beer in salute. I danced with Ethan first, letting him stand on my feet while we swayed to a slow song. Then Maya, who was suddenly self-conscious and giggly. Then Daniel, who held me close and whispered, "I love you," against my temple. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I forgot it was there. Around 8, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fairy lights grew brighter, my attorney called. I stepped away from the noise, phone pressed to my ear. "He signed," she said. Her voice was crisp, satisfied. "Full settlement. Payment plan approved by the court. First installment is due in 30 days. The fraud charges are off the table as long as he complies." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. "Thank you." "You did the hard part," she replied. "I just filed the paperwork. Congratulations, Emily, on everything." I hung up and stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool night air. The garden smelled like roses and cut grass. Behind me, music and laughter floated on the breeze. Ahead of me, Daniel was spinning Maya in circles, while Ethan chased fireflies with a jar. I walked back to them, slipping my hand into Daniel's. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded once, and he grinned. We didn't need to say it out loud. We both knew this was the beginning of something good. But the night had one more surprise. Around 9, as guests began filtering out and the DJ started packing up,
a woman approached me near the dessert table. She was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun and a tailored blazer over jeans. She held a leather portfolio under one arm and wore an expression that was both apologetic and determined. "Emily?" she said. Her voice was gentle. "I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm a financial advisor, and I've been working with the forensic accountant your attorney hired." I tensed instinctively, but something about her demeanor put me at ease. She wasn't here to ruin anything. She was here to deliver news. I gestured to a quieter corner of the garden, away from the remaining guests. "What is it?" I asked. Claire opened the portfolio and pulled out a spreadsheet. When we were tracing Derek's assets, we found something unusual. He's been receiving quarterly dividends from a trust established by his late grandfather. Derek was listed as a beneficiary, but the trust was set up with specific conditions. One of them was that funds could only be released to him if he was actively supporting his dependents. I blinked. He wasn't. Exactly. Which means he violated the terms of the trust. The trustee, Derek's uncle, wasn't aware of the divorce or the abandonment. When we brought it to his attention, he was appalled. He's agreed to redirect Derek's share of the dividends to you and your children, retroactive to the date Derek left. It's not a fortune, but it's approximately $15,000 a year for the last 3 years plus future payments. My breath caught. $15,000 a year wasn't life-changing money, but it was breathing room. It was summer camp for the kids, a vacation fund, an emergency cushion. It was one less thing to worry about. "He agreed to that?" I asked. Claire nodded. He said, and I quote, "If Derek wants to act like a deadbeat, he can be treated like one. The paperwork is already filed. You'll receive the back payments within 60 days, and the trust will set up automatic deposits moving forward." I laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Claire replied. "You fought for what was yours. You deserve this." She handed me a copy of the trust documents and a business card. "If you have questions, call me. And congratulations. On the wedding, on the settlement, on all of it." She left as quietly as she'd arrived, disappearing into the thinning crowd. I stood there holding the papers, my mind spinning. It felt surreal, like the universe had finally decided to tip the scales back in my favor after years of imbalance. Daniel found me a few minutes later, Maya asleep against his shoulder, and Ethan dozing in a chair nearby. "Everything okay?" he asked. I showed him the documents, explained what Claire had told me. His eyes widened, and then he laughed, shaking his head in amazement. "Unbelievable. It's like the universe looked at you and said, yeah, she's earned this." We gathered the kids and said our goodbyes, thanking the remaining guests and the venue staff. My parents hugged me tight, my father whispering, "You did good, kiddo." Jenna loaded leftover cupcakes into a box and made me promise to call her tomorrow with every detail. The drive home was quiet. Maya and Ethan slept in the back seat, tangled together like puppies. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel and the other laced through mine. I leaned my head against the window, watching the streetlights blur past, feeling the weight of the day settle into something softer. When we got home, Daniel carried Ethan inside, while I guided a half-awake Maya to her room. I tucked them both in, kissing their foreheads and whispering, "I love you." They murmured sleepy replies and burrowed deeper into their blankets. Downstairs, Daniel had opened a bottle of champagne. We sat on the back porch, the night cool and still around us. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one. "To new beginnings," he said. "To justice," I replied. We clinked glasses and drank. The champagne was sweet and bubbly, and I let myself savor it, the taste and the moment and the man sitting beside me. "Do you think he'll actually pay?" Daniel asked after a while. I considered it. "I think he doesn't have a choice. The liens are real, the court order is real. He can try to run, but my attorney is relentless. He'll pay. And if he doesn't?" I smiled. "Then he goes to jail for fraud. Either way, he doesn't get to disappear again." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've chosen each other fully and honestly. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The wind rustled through the trees. I thought about the version of myself from 3 years ago, the one who couldn't see past the next bill or the next shift. I wish I could tell her it gets better, that she's stronger than she knows, that she'll not only survive, she'll thrive. But the night wasn't done teaching me lessons yet.
I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Daniel's side of the bed was empty, but still warm. I stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of a long day in my muscles, and smiled at the sight of my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. Downstairs, I found Daniel flipping pancakes, while Maya and Ethan sat at the table, still in their pajamas, coloring on placemats. Ethan looked up and grinned. "Mama, Daniel's making the funny pancakes." Funny pancakes meant shapes, dinosaurs, stars, lopsided hearts. Daniel had a knack for it, and the kids adored him for it. He glanced over his shoulder and winked at me. "Morning, Mrs. Rivera." I laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "Morning." We ate breakfast together, syrup sticky and chaotic, with Ethan narrating a story about a superhero pancake, and Maya rolling her eyes, but smiling anyway. It felt ordinary in the best possible way, like this was just the first of 1,000 mornings we'd share. After breakfast, I checked my phone. There were messages from friends congratulating us, photos from the wedding someone had already posted online, and an email from my attorney with the subject line, "Settlement Update." I opened it, skimming the details. Derek had made the first payment, a wire transfer clearing into an escrow account that morning. It was real. It was happening. Jenna called around noon, demanding details. I filled her in on everything: the trust fund, the settlement payment, the surreal perfection of the whole day. She whooped so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You deserve this," she said fiercely. "Every bit of it. I'm so proud of you, Em." "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. "You kept me sane. You kept us afloat." That's what sisters do. We talked for an hour, laughing and reminiscing, and when I hung up, I felt full in a way that had nothing to do with pancakes. That afternoon, Daniel took the kids to the park, giving me some quiet time. I stood in the backyard with a cup of tea, looking at the tire swing and the garden beds we'd planted in the spring. I thought about the future, college funds and family vacations, maybe a bigger house someday, maybe not. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we had options now. We had stability. I thought about Derek too, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. He'd chosen greed and pride over his family. He'd gambled everything on the belief that he could outsmart the system, and he'd lost. I didn't wish him harm, but I didn't wish him well either. He was a chapter I'd closed, a lesson I'd learned. That evening, we had a small dinner at home, just the four of us. Daniel grilled burgers, and we ate outside under the string lights we'd hung last summer. Maya told us about a project she was working on at school, and Ethan demonstrated his latest Lego creation, which he claimed was a spaceship, but looked more like a very ambitious tower. After the kids went to bed, Daniel and I sat on the couch, my feet in his lap, a blanket draped over us. The TV played something forgettable in the background. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence was easy, companionable, safe. "Do you think it'll always feel like this?" I asked eventually. "Like what?" "Like we made it. Like we're on the other side." Daniel thought for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on my ankle. "I think there'll be hard days," he said. "Life doesn't stop throwing curveballs, but I think we'll face them together, and that makes all the difference." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and adjustments. Derek's payments came on time, funneled through the court-ordered system. The trust fund deposits started appearing in a separate account I set up for the kids' education. I reduced my hours at work, finally able to breathe without the constant pressure of financial panic. Maya joined the school's drama club. Ethan started soccer. We took a weekend trip to the coast, the four of us building sandcastles and hunting for shells. Daniel and I talked about the future, maybe adopting a dog, maybe trying for another kid someday, maybe just enjoying the life we'd built. One evening, about a month after the wedding, Maya asked me a question while I was tucking her in. "Mama, are you happy now?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." "Good," she said. "You deserve to be happy." I kissed her goodnight and left the room, my heart so full it ached. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the sounds of home. Ethan's soft snoring, Daniel washing dishes downstairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, terrified and alone. I thought about the wedding, the confrontation, the moment I'd handed Derek those papers and watched his world crumble. I thought about justice and healing and the quiet, persistent work of rebuilding a life. And I realized something. I hadn't just survived. I'd become the person I needed to be all along, strong enough to fight, brave enough to love again, wise enough to know the difference. The best revenge wasn't just living well. It was living fully, authentically, with the people who mattered. It was choosing joy over bitterness, action over resentment, hope over despair. I walked downstairs to where Daniel was drying the last plate. He looked up and smiled, and I crossed the room to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you. I love you too." Outside, the night was quiet. Inside, we were home.